Ava Baron Combs. Yes, it's breaking news. Diddy adopted a white child.
This is my life.
I have a lot of cars now.
This is because I am a great father, but I'm sleeping with the girl. Tell me, who do y'all have a crush on? Tell Daddy the truth.
There's a lot of things that people do that end up sitting and they can't get over it. And they got to keep getting high, hoping to get it out of their head. But when you lose your man card.
Terrence Howard just lit another fire under the Diddy scandal, and this time, it might involve Diddy's adopted daughter, Ava Baron. Yeah, that's the same Ava who basically vanished from the public eye shortly after being introduced to the world. But now, Howard's latest comments are triggering a whole new wave of speculation. What started off as a bizarre podcast moment is now spiraling into something much, much darker. We thought Terrence Howard's history with Diddy ended with those creepy freakoff allegations, but apparently, the man's been sitting on more tea than we realized. And just when everyone thought this case couldn't get messier, federal prosecutors updated the indictment against Diddy with new charges, fresh victims, and possibly one very unexpected name, Ava. That's right. There's talk that Ava Baron might actually be one of the unnamed victims in the case. It's still rumor at this point, but let's just say fans are connecting dots. And they're not liking the picture it paints. Let's rewind. This whole thing started when Terrence Howard popped up on a podcast and casually dropped a bombshell. He claimed that Diddy had tried to lure him into an intimate setup under the guise of acting lessons. According to Howard, it started off with Diddy calling him over multiple times, saying he wanted him as an acting coach. But once he got there, no script, no scenes, just Diddy sitting around watching him, listening to music, staring, awkward silence. And then came the moment that flipped the vibe. Terrence said his assistant pulled him aside and basically told him, "I think he's trying to sleep with you." At that point, Howard cut off contact. He said the whole thing made him realize there was something more manipulative going on, something designed to strip away a man's dignity rather than teach him how to act. And he didn't mince words either. He said that once you give up your manhood, there's no coming back from it. He then went even deeper, claiming that Diddy has a pattern, allegedly targeting black men specifically at these so-called freakoff parties. According to Howard, these weren't just wild nights. These were orchestrated events meant to break men down psychologically. He talked about it like a calculated operation, one that others in the industry know about, but stay quiet on, either out of fear or shame. And then, without even naming names, he hinted that he wasn't the only one. He made it sound like there were others, men who went through similar experiences but never spoke up. The suggestion wasn't subtle. This wasn't a one-time thing. It was part of a much bigger, much darker pattern. Naturally, the internet went into meltdown mode. But Howard didn't stop there. A few days later, he posted a cryptic video on Twitter. He didn't name anyone directly, but he talked about powerful people threatening him. He said he was ready to reveal the full truth. And just to drive the point home, he used the hashtag #ManCard, a callback to everything he'd been saying earlier. At this point, fans started speculating that there was more to Howard's story than what he had already shared. The timing of his post, the language he used, the veiled threats, it all pointed to something bigger bubbling beneath the surface. That's when people started whispering, could this be about Ava? Because if we're being honest, Ava's entire introduction into the Combs family was strange. Back in 2020, right in the thick of the pandemic, Diddy went live on Instagram and introduced Ava Baron Combs to the world. He proudly said he'd adopted her. She was white, young, and completely unknown to the public. But in that moment, Diddy presented her like she was the newest member of his empire. No explanation, no build-up, just, this is Ava, she's mine now. He had her on video calling him Papa Combs. She recited a little backstory, saying that she met his family when she was just 6 months old, and that he wanted to be a caring man who brought her in from the streets. It was a heartwarming tale on the surface, but even then, something about it didn't sit quite right with people. The moment felt awkward, forced, and Ava? She looked visibly uncomfortable in the clip. Her body language didn't scream family joy. It looked more like someone trying to smile through confusion. And then, silence. After that introduction, Ava basically vanished. No regular appearances, no photos, no mentions. Diddy's social media went back to normal, filled with his sons, parties, business ventures, but barely a trace of Ava. She wasn't in the family photos, wasn't at events, and aside from 1 or 2 blurry appearances, she was practically erased from the picture. Now, maybe that's just how Diddy rolls, or maybe it's not, because in light of everything that's come out about him recently, the lawsuits, the freakoffs, the coercion claims, Ava's disappearance feels a whole lot more chilling than it did back then. And when fans started going back to that original video, they noticed something else. Diddy compared Ava's adoption to Madonna's. That might sound harmless, until you remember that Madonna's adoptions have been surrounded by serious controversy. Several of her cases were flagged for bypassing legal channels, and organizations in Ethiopia and elsewhere accused her of misleading parents, promising education but taking children away permanently. So for Diddy to say, "I adopted like Madonna did," that wasn't the flex he thought it was. And here's where things really start getting disturbing. In that same Instagram video, Diddy pressed Ava to explain her backstory, to publicly validate his adoption, like it was some kind of PR move. He even interrupted her mid-sentence, trying to steer the narrative. Ava, clearly nervous, stumbled through what sounded like a rehearsed explanation. She said she had permission from her mother, that she met Diddy's other kids early on, that she always came over, but it all felt off. More like she was reading from a script than telling a genuine story. And the red flags? They weren't subtle. First, the sons were front and center in that video, not the daughters, which was odd, because if Ava had bonded with Diddy's daughters, wouldn't they be the ones introducing her? Fans picked up on this immediately. Why were the boys so involved? Why did Ava look so uncomfortable? And most importantly, why did she disappear right after? The deeper people dug, the weirder it got. Ava's absence wasn't just a matter of privacy. It was like she had been edited out of the family. And considering the recent accusations circling Diddy, ranging from trafficking to psychological manipulation, the silence around Ava became deafening. People online started asking the question no one wanted to say out loud: what really happened to her? Enter Gene Deal, Diddy's former bodyguard, and a man who is not afraid to speak out. According to Gene, the Ava adoption wasn't some heartwarming act of charity. He claimed it was all for optics, a staged move. He said Diddy found a young, homeless girl, brought her into his world under the pretense of adoption, and used her for clout. Once the public gave him praise, he allegedly discarded her like a prop, not harmed physically, as far as Gene claimed, but emotionally, spiritually, that's a whole different story. Gene didn't hold back. He called it smoke and mirrors, implying Diddy never had genuine intentions. Ava was allegedly there to give the illusion of generosity during a time when Diddy, like the rest of the world, was locked down and trying to stay relevant. And when he got what he wanted from the situation, she was gone, removed, forgotten. And here's where the speculation takes a darker turn. Gene dropped hints that the real reason Ava hasn't been seen isn't just because Diddy moved on. It's because something happened. Something he couldn't outright say. He didn't use the word evidence, but he talked about the industry knowing the truth, about secrets that everyone whispers but no one says aloud. And fans? They started doing the math. It's one thing to vanish from social media. It's another to vanish entirely. No updates, no check-ins, no nothing. Now, remember the federal raids? The ones where investigators seized Diddy's electronics and started combing through everything? Well, according to Gene, the feds were specifically looking for media involving underage individuals, not just any photos or videos, but things that would land someone in prison. Gene didn't name Ava, but the timing, the implications, the silence, it all lined up a little too cleanly. Then came the 50 Cent connection. If anyone's been screaming about Diddy's dirt for years, it's 50. And back then, most people wrote him off as being petty or holding a grudge. He is the king of long-running beefs after all. But now, the things he was hinting at don't seem so far-fetched anymore, especially since insiders are now claiming that 50 Cent has hard evidence involving Ava, or, at the very least, something that connects her to this whole mess. And he's not sitting on it quietly either. Last year, 50 publicly announced he was working on a documentary, one that would dive into Diddy's controversies. The name? Did he do it? Subtle. He said he had receipts, inside sources, and a full-on investigative team ready to go. And allegedly, Ava's story, or whatever part of it he uncovered, is going to be featured prominently in the series. Keep in mind, all this resurfaced after Terrence Howard started making noise, which brings us back to the present. The indictment against Diddy was recently updated with new charges. The language used? Damning. It painted a picture of a man who didn't just party hard. He manipulated, coerced, and orchestrated entire performances where women were allegedly forced to participate in acts they never agreed to. The phrase freakoffs wasn't just a casual nickname, it was a label given to events that were allegedly filmed, produced, and directed, like twisted adult performances, with Diddy at the center. The documents say these weren't just impulsive crimes. They were organized, calculated, and executed with help from others. Women were allegedly flown across states and even across borders. They were promised money, careers, and rent, and in return, they were trapped, emotionally blackmailed, coerced into acts with Diddy and other guests under the assumption that they were consenting, when in reality, they were being pushed into it through manipulation and fear. Now, here's the part that grabbed everyone's attention. The newly added victims? They weren't named, but rumor has it, Ava might be one of them. The internet's been buzzing ever since, and while nothing's been confirmed officially, there are too many eerie parallels to ignore. The sudden disappearance, the timing of the original video, the uncomfortable body language, the media silence, the federal interest in underage content. It all paints a disturbing possibility that the girl who once called Diddy Papa Combs might now be a central figure in one of the most explosive celebrity cases we've seen in decades. Let's talk about how calculated this entire situation really was, because the federal documents, they didn't hold back. They described a persistent and pervasive pattern of abuse that stretched back over a decade. And this wasn't just emotional manipulation. We're talking physical coercion, threats, blackmail, and a whole network of enablers who helped keep it all quiet. According to the feds, Diddy didn't just use his power to seduce people. He allegedly used it to control them by offering careers, housing, fame, and then threatening to snatch it all away if they didn't fall in line. If they refused, they were cut off. If they gave in, they were dragged into his world and branded as consenting when they clearly weren't. It's the classic blueprint of coercion masked as opportunity. Now, remember those freak-offs? The ones Terrence and others talked about? The indictment confirmed they were more than rumors. These were allegedly fully produced performances, complete with cameras, lighting, and a curated guest list. Women and commercial workers were flown in, sometimes from other countries. And these weren't spontaneous parties, they were premeditated, arranged events. Think less celebrity after-party and more underground exploitation ring dressed up in Versace. And according to those same documents, Diddy allegedly forced participants, at times even underage girls, to perform in these setups. Not only were they pushed into it, but he allegedly recorded it, archived it, and used it as leverage. It was never just about pleasure, it was about power, dominance, control. That's where things get horrifying, because when you place Ava's timeline next to these accusations, the overlap is impossible to ignore. Diddy adopted her in the middle of the pandemic, just as the walls were starting to close in, and then she's gone. No updates, no family bonding moments, just erased from the narrative. And if we're being honest, the idea that this adoption might have been a strategic distraction, a publicity move to soften his image, starts to sound a lot more realistic. Let's go back to Gene Deal for a second. The man wasn't just speculating. He said the industry knew, that people had heard the stories. And while he didn't name Ava, the way he talked about Diddy's behavior was chilling. He mentioned tapes, videos, stuff the feds were supposedly digging for, things that would change everything if found. Things that, if they involved a minor, would completely destroy any hope Diddy had of walking free. And then, just to make things even more twisted, 50 Cent pops back up, basically saying, "I told you so." He teased that there were videos out there that even the feds were scared to release. Not because they weren't illegal, but because the public reaction would be nuclear. He said, "They know they can't charge him for what we saw, but we can't unsee what we saw." And when someone like 50 talks like that, you listen, especially when he's already announced a documentary and claimed he's got receipts. If he's not bluffing, that doc might be the first time the public sees just how deep this scandal really goes. Meanwhile, the public's attention has turned back to Ava, the girl who once shyly said, "I'm a Scorpio, Ava Baron Combs," in that video, now possibly entangled in something far darker than anyone realized at the time. And to make matters worse, people are starting to ask, where is she now? Has anyone checked in? Why hasn't she resurfaced? Not even once. During all of this? And if she's truly one of the victims listed in the updated indictment, that opens up another question. Will she testify? Because based on how the feds are handling this, they're building a case, not for headlines, not for drama, for conviction. They're looking to bring down an empire. And if Ava is involved, even anonymously, that means her story could become one of the central pillars of this entire legal battle. Here's where it gets even more twisted. One of the updated charges accuses Diddy of knowingly recruiting and coercing individuals, using money, status, or threats to get what he wanted. And in many of these situations, the alleged victims weren't just women. They were children when he first got involved with them. The phrase reckless disregard of age appears more than once in the document. That's not vague, that's intentional. Let that sink in. And remember, all of this came out only after Terrence Howard started pulling back the curtain. That podcast, that cryptic Twitter video, the man card hashtag, it all suddenly makes a lot more sense. The threats, the fear, the pressure to stay silent. Terrence wasn't just being dramatic, he knew something. And based on what's surfacing now, it may have been a warning. Because if what the streets are saying is true, and if Ava is indeed one of the victims added to the case, then this isn't just another celebrity scandal. It's a full-blown tragedy that played out in plain sight. One that was dressed up in glitz, glamour, and Instagram Live filters. But underneath, it was broken, toxic, dangerous. And now we're reaching the boiling point. Because while the world was focused on Diddy's music, empire, fashion line, and all the smoke and mirror distractions, the actual story was unraveling quietly behind the scenes. All those years of power plays and press manipulation were finally catching up to him. The same headlines he once controlled, now flipping on him. But here's the truly sinister part. Even in the most damning federal documentation, Diddy's strategy stayed the same. He didn't just deny the allegations, he tried to blur the lines. According to the reports, Diddy allegedly forced his victims to accept payment after the acts, essentially trying to cover himself by making it look like a transaction. A paper trail meant to paint everything as consensual, when in reality, it was coercion disguised as compensation. This wasn't just abuse, it was abuse dressed up to look like luxury. Big money, high fashion, five-star hotel rooms, jet setting across the globe. But the women, and possibly Ava, were allegedly trapped, powerless, outnumbered, told that saying no would mean losing everything, from career opportunities to physical safety. And what makes it worse is the way some people online still tried to twist the narrative, blaming the women, accusing them of clout chasing, ignoring the fact that, according to investigators, force, fraud, and manipulation were core to how Diddy operated behind closed doors. The indictment even broke it down into timelines, from as far back as 2009 and continuing through 2024. Diddy is accused of targeting individuals across multiple states and even internationally. And every time, it followed the same playbook: isolate, control, exploit, all while hiding behind fame and influence. But now, the playbook is out, and as more documents surface, the whispers around Ava are getting louder. See, fans aren't forgetting that moment, that video, that awkward smile, that Papa Combs introduction that now feels like a horror story in disguise. And while she's not been named publicly in the indictment, everything about her timeline matches the sudden shift in the case. It's not confirmed, but it's possible. And if she's truly one of the new anonymous victims added by the feds, then that opens a whole new chapter of this nightmare. And let's be honest, this is no longer just about Ava. If she's involved, it only further confirms what people like Gene Deal and Terrence Howard have been trying to say for years. This wasn't one incident, one slip-up, or one bad party. This was systemic, repeated, protected by people who should have stopped it, but didn't. And here's where the industry's silence gets loud. Because we've seen this movie before. R. Kelly, Weinstein, Cosby, power-shielding predators, victims punished for speaking out, enablers rewarded for staying quiet. And right now, all eyes are on Diddy's circle, his business partners, his legal team, his industry allies, because people are starting to ask, who knew? Even Cassie's lawsuit made it clear. Diddy was surrounded by people who either ignored the red flags or actively helped cover them up. And if that's true, if Ava's story was buried under the weight of his influence, then every person who stayed silent played a part in this mess. Which brings us back to 50 Cent, who isn't just clowning Diddy for fun anymore. He's playing chess, That documentary, it's coming. And if the allegations about Ava or any other victim are proven true, it won't just end Diddy's career. It'll blow open an entire hidden world that's existed behind record deals and award shows. The stakes? Monumental. Because this isn't just about one man's downfall. This is about setting a precedent. If the court finds that Diddy manipulated the press, controlled narratives, exploited people, and used freak-offs as tools of coercion, then every other celebrity who's been hiding behind the same playbook, they're now on borrowed time. And that's exactly why so many people are panicking, why deals are getting quietly canceled, why brand partnerships are being reevaluated. Because no one wants to be standing next to the man whose entire empire was allegedly built on broken people and buried stories. So now we wait. The trial is coming. Delayed, yes, but not derailed. And if Ava does take the stand, if she does testify, it'll be one of the most explosive courtroom moments in modern celebrity history. A girl once introduced as part of a feel-good adoption story might now be the person who brings the whole empire crashing down. No more filters, no more PR spins, just the truth. Because if Ava really was part of this, and the rumors are true, that she was just another pawn in Diddy's carefully crafted empire of manipulation, then what we're witnessing isn't just another celebrity downfall. It's a reckoning for everyone who helped keep the machine running, for the media outlets that never asked questions, for the Hollywood elites who smiled for photos but ignored the whispers, for the public figures who gave Diddy cover, stood next to him at award shows, called him a legend, while the truth was rotting underneath. And for Ava, if she does come forward, if she sits on that stand and tells her story under oath, it won't just shake the courtroom. It'll echo across an industry that's gotten far too comfortable letting power protect predators. And let's be clear, this is what makes this entire situation so different from every other Hollywood scandal. Because Ava wasn't famous. She wasn't a singer or a model or a rising actress. She was a child, a kid who was suddenly thrust into the public eye as Diddy's adopted daughter and then vanished without a trace. There were no tabloid updates, no interviews, no family holidays, just one awkward video and then total silence. And now, in the wake of some of the darkest allegations the entertainment industry has seen in years, her name is quietly resurfacing. The timelines are being compared, her disappearance being re-examined, and the question hanging in the air: what really happened to Ava Baron? If the feds believe she's a victim, then her story may already be a part of the case, hidden behind an anonymous label. And if that's true, then everything changes. Because this won't just be about freak-offs and wild parties. It'll be about a girl who was brought into a billionaire's world and then vanished when the camera stopped rolling. And for those still trying to defend Diddy, here's the thing. How many more victims have to come forward before the excuses run out? How many more insiders have to speak up before people believe this wasn't just tabloid drama? Terrence Howard tried to warn everyone. Gene Deal gave the industry's dirty laundry a voice. And now 50 Cent is preparing to drag all of it into the spotlight. This isn't alleged misconduct. This is decades of silence catching up with someone who thought he'd never be held accountable. And the final irony? Diddy's greatest weapon was always the narrative. Controlling it, spinning it, directing it like a mogul produces a record. But now, that same narrative is crumbling. One leaked document at a time, one updated indictment at a time, one Ava-shaped question mark at a time. Because this time, the narrative isn't his to control. It belongs to the victims, to the people who were told to stay quiet, to the names that were erased, and slowly but surely, they're taking that power back. Now the question is, will Ava be one of them? We'll find out when the trial begins. But if there's one thing we've learned, it's this. You can hide a lot behind fame, but not forever. The truth always leaks. And when it does, it burns empires to the ground. Stick around, because what comes next? You're not going to want to miss it, so don't forget to like and subscribe.